Hello and welcome to the Daily Bible Podcast. My name is William Hemsworth. Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. Well, we're continuing on into Matthew chapter 11. We're about halfway through this chapter. We're slowly but surely making our way through it, verse by verse. And like I said at the beginning of the show on December 1st, the goal of the Daily Bible is to make sure every verse is covered. So today we're going to look at Matthew chapter 11, verses 12 through 14, which say, "From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has suffered violence, and men of violence take it by force. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John, and if you are willing to accept it, he is Elijah, who is to come." So here in verse 14, Jesus specifically says that John the Baptist in this case, comes in the spirit of Elijah. I guess the most telling part of the passage we're reading today are verses 12 and 13. Now, from a historical viewpoint, it seems like Jesus is referring to what's called the Messianic woes. And there was a tradition in ancient Judaism at this time that the coming of the Messiah would be accompanied by, a lot of distress, tribulation, things of that nature. In this period of messianic woes there'd be a lot of apostasy. People wouldn't be following the laws. There'd be a lot of lawlessness. And there would be persecution of the holy ones. Now, as we know, John the Baptist was beheaded. He was executed for his witness to Christ. And we see that in Matthew chapter 14, verse 10, which we will get to later on down the road. John the Baptist is the first of the faithful to perish in these, quote, woeful times, during this time of the messianic woe. Now, as we all know later on, Jesus will suffer the same violence. He'll on the cross. His hands and feet pierced for the sins of you and I. And this will also be followed by the disciples. 11 of the 12 disciples died a martyr's death. The only one that didn't was John. He died on the island of Patmos in exile. And as we read, it continues on into the early church as well. We read of Saint Stephen in the book of Acts, who was stoned to death. And then also in the period of the early church, St. Ignatius of Antioch, St. Polycarp, St. Perpetua, all these great men and women of the faith died that same type of death as well. So that's what Jesus is talking about when he's saying that there will be violence and men of violence will take it by force. That's kind of what he's talking about there. And a lot of this hostility it's related to the paradigm shift between the old covenant and the new covenant. And that's just a lot of people just didn't understand it. It was hard for them to accept. So their ways of life were changing. And sometimes as people, we go about it the wrong way. Well, that's it for today's show. God bless you. Thank you for joining me, and have a great day. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email me at hopewithin18@gmail.com. Other than that, God bless you all, and have a great day.